In South Africa's 31 years of democracy, heads of states have always endeavored to use the State of the Nation address to present the government's plans, but it also reflects the pulse of the nation. One political analyst who's observed SONAs since the dawn of our democracy believes every president aims to project hope.
So that mixture of substance and story is the blend that has to be found. And so the way I think of SONAs is that they are a mixture of statecraft and speechcraft. The statecraft is the kind of substance that comes from government programs. It's a plan of action. It's a call for action in the case of Tumamina. It's a call for unity in that case. And then the speechcraft is the storyline, the narrative that underpins it. And of course, the great speeches bring the two together. So we have a good story to tell was actually a very skillful way of doing that, because it told a story about progress in a number of areas. It said good things are happening. And that was a very good theme for that particular SONA.
Often, the State of the Nation address has also mirrored the election campaign promises of the governing party of the day, the ANC. The message of the statement has always required a delicate balance of trying to reflect in a positive light gains that have been made and new programs of action, as well as boosting the mood in the country.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas.
After Nelson Mandela's 5-year tenure as president, which was underpinned by the principle of Ubuntu and a promise of a better life for all, in came the era of Thabo Mbeki. The new president continued Madiba's legacy, but through a prism of a broader continental agenda.
Mbeki understood what Kwame Nkrumah had said before, many years before, from 1963 and all those, recognizing that South Africa's independence or South Africa's prosperity is meaningless in the context of the broader African prosperity. And that's why from a Thabo Mbeki era, if you look at what defined his era, was more the inclusion of the Pan-African story, or the revitalization or the revival of the Pan-African promise for the continent, but South Africa within that continent.
So help me God.
In 2009, the era of poetry came to a screeching halt as the world was recovering from a global financial crisis. Closer to home, the country had just emerged from one of the fiercest internal ANC contests over who would become South Africa's next president. The newly minted President Jacob Zuma had a global event on the horizon, the 2010 Football World Cup, kicking off what he punted as a year of action.
The hosting of the FIFA World Cup makes 2010 truly a year of action. We have spent many years planning for this World Cup. We only have 3 months to go. And we are determined to make a success of it.
When President Jacob Zuma was coming in, it was just ahead of the 2010 World Cup, which was a big promise for South Africa, but really for Africa. It was a big promise for Africa that Africa is capable.
In 2014, with the country celebrating 20 years of democracy and an election year, Zuma picked up on Madiba's promises, reflecting on what had been done in the 2 decades of governance by the ANC. The reaction to this was beginning to take a more skeptical tone.
We have a good story to tell.
At that time leading up to 2014, which was the 20 years of South Africa, the questions now were beginning to be asked. Has South Africa or the ruling party been able to deliver on the promise of a better life for all?
want to be there for the alcoholic. I want to be there for the drug addict. I want to be there for the victims of violence and abuse. I want to lend a hand. Send me.
After what was dubbed the 9 wasted years by those overcome by what was to morph into Ramaphoria, a new era of leadership under President Cyril Ramaphosa began.
When President Cyril Ramaphosa came in, within the context of a state capture, disappointment and questions about whether South Africa that was promised in '94 and the many successive State of Nations and successive election cycles and campaigns, is that South Africa ever going to be realized? And Cyril Ramaphosa came in at that stage with State of the Nation, and I think his broader promise was Tumamina. And if you want to frame Tumamina, you almost have to reflect on JFK, I think 68 or so, when he spoke about ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country.
Once again, in 2024, the political environment required a different kind of messaging from the head of state. Ramaphosa, who faced the real prospect of his party, the ANC, declining, while commemorating 30 years of democracy at the same time, his SONA in February last year was arguably crucial.
So the president has to walk a bit of a tightrope. On the one hand, this is the speech of the president of the country, he's the head of government, this head of state. But of course he is also still the president of the ANC, and he's a politician, a political leader, and so he needs to sell his own party's position on a range of things, but do in a way that's very deft and very understated. And of course last year's speech in February 2024, just a few months before what everybody knew was going to be a watershed election, the president probably went a little further in straying into kind of election territory. He used the narrative of Tinswala.
Now South Africa's political landscape has changed completely, with Ramaphosa now leading a government of national unity. Added to that, an unprecedented war of words on social media between himself and his Rwandan counterpart, Paul Kagame, as a conflict rages on the continent. Ramaphosa's 2025 SONA needs to reflect a delicate balance of local political organizations finding common ground while staying true to the ANC's original promise of moving South Africa forward and doing more together. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo in Johannesburg.